Alright friendos, it's a pretty slow Monday, so that means it's time for a Q&A. For those of you just joining, all you have to do is leave your Halo-related questions down below, and hopefully they'll be answered on next week's show. I also wanted to say that, I have a subreddit. Well, I had a subreddit for a very long time, and I never really updated it, so it died a very painful death, but I've recently resuscitated it. So if you want to interact with me on more of a frequent basis, I'd recommend you check it out. I'll leave a link down below, and let's get started with the first question. So the first question comes from The Elite, who says, "Thank you for bringing back the Q&As. Also, do you think that we will see the Flood return in Halo Infinite, or do you think 343 Industries will save them for another game?" So I'm answering this because I've gotten a lot of Flood-related questions, on top of questions posed as if the Flood are a given. So right off the bat, I do not believe we will see the Flood in Halo Infinite. I think we might see traces of them, since it's a Halo installation, but I don't think they will ever be part of the main plot. The reason for that is the Flood are kind of endgame content, I've heard it referred to as. Narratively, the Flood are kind of the end of the road, the biggest thing in the galaxy, the scariest thing, and so just immediately getting them out there right now would not be wise, just narratively. Halo Wars 2, some people already have a lot of problems with that game because it brought back the Flood for a DLC. They said that kind of invalidated the end of Halo 3, so the Flood need to be used tactically, and if Halo Infinite is a soft reboot for the series, a new direction, as 343 keeps saying, they're not going to immediately start this new direction by putting in the endgame enemy. The Flood we'll probably see in the future, who knows, maybe if things get desperate, 343 will put them in to make us happy, but no, I'm not expecting the Flood to be in the game. I don't think we're going to see them for a while. The next question comes from Mr. Anonymous, who says, "Q&A, after the underwater scenes in the trailer for Infinite, people thought that there might be new water mechanics, but in most games people hate those levels, so how would you design and balance an underwater level in the campaign or multiplayer?" Okay, so I do think that underwater can work, and interestingly enough, I do think underwater would be the place in Halo where you would take advantage of stuff like enhanced mobility. So let's say underwater, you've got moon shoes. You fall really slowly, you can jump kind of high, and overall there's kind of a sluggish feeling. So you have kind of a limited thrust meter, and it kind of lets you jet your Spartan in different directions, so you can kind of turn yourself into this little wrecking ball where you've got like a crowd of grunts or something underwater. They've all got masks on. You can see bubbles going up as they fire their plasma pistols. It kind of sizzles and cuts through the water with a trail of bubbles, and you can kind of look at all these little grunts, and you're like, all right, here we go, and you use all your momentum to just kind of thrust your body in their direction and knock them down like bowling pins. That's where I do think that the underwater enhanced mobility stuff could work. Have some kind of system where the second your Spartan goes underwater, your gameplay module is changed. You know, maybe the HUD can say, you know, pressure detected, thrusters online or something, and then there you go. As long as you're underwater, the combat feels a little bit different from how it is on land. That's how I design it, at least. The next question comes from Deanna Dong Doorbell, who says, "Q&A, do you think the extended lore will play a major role other than the ring? Also, will they clarify any of the extended lore for people who haven't read the books?" So, hi everyone, this is Late Night Gaming from the future. I ran out of Halo footage, so I hope you appreciate this Destiny footage. The word lore is a bit of a trigger word for me right now, so bear with me for about a minute. I need to rant. Let's talk about that word for a second. So I've been playing a lot of Destiny, and maybe I've been playing too much Destiny because the word lore is starting to drive me crazy. Like, even within the community, they're referring to the narrative as lore. Like, things will happen one week and they'll be like, "Did you see what happened in the lore?" It's like, it's not lore, you watched it happen, that's a story. Lore, I usually reserve as a word for deep, entrenched stuff. Very important and forbidden knowledge that only those who are curious seek out. Then you've got things kind of like the backstory of a character or something, where I'd say that that's a little bit more important, and that does kind of play a role in how they interact with you in the game or what events play out if it's a location. Sorry, I had to get that off my chest. Oh my god, I need to talk to someone. I've got so many emotions built up. Destiny is really cool, but right now, the season is a little bit dull. I do think the history and lore of the ring will play a factor, but I don't think it'll be major narrative things. I think that the narrative is just going to be what it is here. I think that the history of the ring will play a role in some of the events that happen in the game, but it won't be the narrative of the game, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think it's gonna be like, oh my god, the Banished, they want to open up the Palace of Pain and stuff. Like, no. The Banished are going to be doing stuff that will be introduced to us within the game, with the history of the ring and stuff kind of supporting the narrative on the outskirts. If that makes any sense, I can clarify it in the comments section. No, I don't think we're going to be seeing deep lore stuff be actually intrinsically tied to the narrative. I just think it'll be part of the world building and part of the outskirts of the narrative. The next question comes from CPU00001, who says, Q&A, did you ever get recon in Halo 3? Also, are there any animations from Halo 5 that just look amazing to you, like a certain reload or aiming down the sights? So I have never gotten recon in Halo 3. But as far as animations, so this is an excellent question because I have a lot of very specific opinions that I can't share with people because it's kind of a who cares, man. But Halo 5 does have quite a lot of animations that I personally really like, even though there are a lot of animations in that game that I do think look very kind of janky, like anything you do with the DMR just looks wrong in Halo 5. But the saw, specifically the sprinting animation when you hold the saw in Halo 5, I think is beautiful, and I can't explain what it is that I like so much about it. I also think the aiming down the sights animation for the light rifle is super cool, and as far as reload animations go, I'd have to say my favorite one, probably in that whole game, is the fuel rod cannon reload. It kind of reminds me a little bit of an old school Bungie reload, where it's very snappy, in the kind of almost comical way you slap in a new fuel rod canister. It's very expressive, bouncy, and I just like it. I like it a lot. I can't explain it, it's so specific. Just, my brain likes it whenever I reload a fuel rod gun in Halo 5. I'd say there's also another weirdly specific animation that I really like. When you have the plasma rifle, the Brute plasma rifle in Halo 5, when you're sprinting and then you jump, there's something about the position of the hands, the responsiveness of the animation that I'm gonna stop talking now because I sound like a lunatic. The next question comes from Maxwell Schaefer, who says, Q&A, do you think that 343 will use the Master Chief for the bombastic storytelling in Halo 1, 2, and 3, and they will use Brohammer and his family to tell a more emotional story like in Halo 4, and what they attempted to do in Halo 5? So, okay, I have a lot of theories. If Brohammer, the Marine that we see in the Discover Hope cutscene that they showed off last year, if he's a reoccurring character, what I predict will happen is it'll kind of be like the Iron Giant, but with a giant green guy instead of a robot. I think that the whole plot is kind of gonna revolve around, you've got this little Marine that finds Master Chief floating in space, and he and Chief kind of tag along with each other on the surface of the ring. Brohammer wants to get home, Master Chief wants to stop whatever the plot is. I think it's going to be a thing where Brohammer is the emotional core of the story, while Master Chief is kind of the brawn. And over the course of the story, they're kind of going to bond together and understand each other more. That's what I think is going to happen. My other theory, if Brohammer is not a reoccurring character and more of kind of like a thing to get the plot going, I'd assume that the plot would be mostly kind of revolving around saving other Marines. Like, Brohammer is just the first of many Marines that you'd encounter, and you'd have to kind of save and rescue along your journey. The next question comes from Duck, who says, Q&A. This question just occurred to me as I thought about how the Mega Construct sets include both elites and brutes. How do you think that the brutes and elites will be differentiated in terms of gameplay and enemy design in Infinite? I haven't seen any discussion around this, and I'm curious to hear what you have to say. So it's definitely going to be interesting. I mean, I can't honestly say because I don't know how 343 think, but if I were to design the brutes, what we'd probably have to do is look at their past and how they performed in the different Halo games and kind of look for weaknesses and strengths within them. So the brutes, the problem with them kind of throughout the Halo games is their very messy inclusion into the games. They were never supposed to be a thing that you'd fight in Halo 2. They were always in the cutscenes, and at some point very close to the game's completion, they were included, and because of that, they feel very rushed and kind of sloppy. They're very glitchy. Their AI is just, Now in Halo 3, since the elites are no longer the bad guys, there's a gap in the combat loop of that game. Because the elites, the grunts, and the jackals, they're kind of the big three. They're the most important parts of Halo combat. And when you take out the elites, there's just a hole there that you need to fill. And the brutes were designed in Halo 3 to kind of fill that hole. They had to. But they didn't want to make them exactly elite clones. So the brutes kind of operated on this idea of they'd have this armor that you'd kind of procedurally wear down until the brute was exposed enough that it would kind of charge at you and make itself vulnerable, and then you pick it off with a headshot. And how that turned out in the game is that unfortunately they're just kind of easier to kill elites. And then you kind of see in Halo Reach, they turn them into sub-elites, is the way I would describe them, where they kind of almost fill that leader position in the triangle, but, they still don't feel like they're at home. So, alright, how would I design a brute? So, the brutes, when I think about them, I kind of am reminded of that quote from one of Bungie's artists back during the Halo 3 days, where when he thinks of brutes, he thinks of magnetism. They have gravity hammers. So, alright, maybe let's go with that. The gravity hammers for the brutes, why don't we update them a little bit? Their armor, let's give it some magnetic properties and stuff. The brutes, I would almost kind of position as almost operators in the field, where you've got kind of the jackal, grunt, and elite being kind of the core backbone, and you've got these operators that are kind of running around, throwing things at you, moving geometry around with their gravity hammers, kind of like Tartarus, you see him doing that, and a lot of those vehicles and weapons would kind of be all built around that, the idea of like physics disruption. Like, in Halo 3, whenever you pick up a gravity hammer, it's kind of like, alright, it's hammer time, and you just start throwing enemies around with its gravity effects. Take that, but amplify it up even more. Turn it into kind of a proper, almost like Half-Life gravity gun type of weapon. Something like that is how I would handle the brutes and kind of their role. Obviously, you can have them charge at the player and stuff. They're brutes. They've got to be savage. But the brutes never came across as animalistic to me. They were always intelligent and always thinking. They enjoyed the hunt. And so you'd kind of play into that. Brutes would be laying traps. They'd be kind of like throwing a monkey wrench into whatever Chief's been planning. So the final question comes from Catherine Whitaker, who says, Q&A, you are allowed to pick one cursed Halo weapon to appear in all mainline Halo games. Which do you pick and why? Alright, so this is gonna be a difficult question. Are you, joke weapons? Are those allowed? Honest to God, funny weapons taken seriously in a Halo game? In which case, I'd say the snark weapon is probably the easiest you could do. So if you haven't played Cursed Halo, the snark weapon is essentially the needler, but it launches these little things that just hop out of the gun and then just take off running along the ground and chasing everything that's around them. They've kind of got a mind of their own, and if you're not careful, your own little projectiles can just turn right around and start chasing you. It's a pretty funny gun that makes pretty great noises. And I guess you could maybe put that in a Halo game, but you'd have to modify its presentation a little bit so that people don't say, is this a joke? As far as kind of taking a concept from Cursed Halo, but reinventing it into something that is serious, so the rocket launcher in Cursed Halo is dumb and bad, and the people who did that should feel dumb and bad, but I like the idea of you've kind of got this one-use thing, and in Cursed Halo, the rocket launcher is facing the wrong way, so if you fire it, the force of the rocket leaving the gun, it just launches out of your hands and goes flying forward. It's a pretty goofy gun, but we're like, okay, let's work with that for a second. What if we had this kind of shoulder-mounted rocket that you could kind of plant yourself, aim it at a target, and then just let it fly right off your shoulder and do its own thing? Some kind of missile that would come down from the sky, or something that I've said before would be super dope, especially if you're considering like vehicle combat, scarabs and stuff like that. Let's have a harpoon gun! Chief gets down on the ground, he has a gigantic thing mounted on his shoulder, he launches it and it kind of sticks into the ground, and then the other end sticks into like a scarab's leg or something and kind of pins it, and there you go, the scarab is kind of trapped there. You can maybe do loops around the scarab, pinning each of its legs down if you have multiple harpoons. Something like that would be cool, like consumable weapons that have a very specific function. I don't know, that's how I would do it, but yeah, there you go. Alright guys, thank you so much for asking all your questions. This is the week that we're gonna see Halo Infinite, and I am gonna be recording my live reactions for this. I'm also gonna have to get to work on making videos, because I don't usually do that. I like to reserve that for, I guess, the people who probably have more interesting opinions than myself, but yeah, I'll be doing that. And guys, with that being said, leave your questions down below, and hopefully they'll be answered next week, and I'll see you on the next video.